the Happy Scientist podcast. Each episode is designed to make you more focused, more productive, and more satisfied in the lab. You can find us online at bitesizebio.com/happyscientist. Your hosts are Kenneth Vogt, founder of the executive coaching firm Vera Claritas, and Dr. Nick Oswald, PhD, bioscientist, and founder of Bitesize Bio.
Hello and welcome to the Happy Scientist podcast from Bitesize Bio. If you want to become a happier, healthier and more productive scientist, you are in the right place. I'm Nick Oswald, the founder of bitesizebio.com, where we provide bioscience researchers with help for improving their technical skills, soft skills and their well-being. And in this podcast, we will be focusing on their well-being. With me, actually, the driving force of this podcast is Kenneth Vogt. I've worked with Ken for over 7 years now, with him as my business mentor and colleague, and I knew that his expertise could help a lot of researchers, so that's why we decided to start this podcast. In these sessions, we'll hear mostly from Ken on principles that will help shape you for a happier and more successful career. Along the way, I'll pitch in with points from my personal experience as a scientist and from working with Ken. So, let's bring in the man himself. Kenneth, how are you?
Doing great. So here we are in the third and final part of our series, recognizing the core mindsets that control your world. So we said there are 6 mindsets. We discussed the first 4 in the last 2 episodes, and we're going to wrap up with the final 2 in this episode. So when we talk about core mindsets, what we're saying is that we all wear many masks and we adapt to changing circumstances, but each of us has an ultimate, ever-present core mindset that drives who we are and how we live our lives and how we process information and how we interact with others. Now, improvement is a possibility with focused intention, and then you can take on the strengths of a mindset that is even more powerful than the one you may presently have, and you'll learn how to overcome temptations and neutralize problems that perhaps you've never been able to deal with before. So there's impetus to understand these mindsets and to see if there's a way for you to grow in your own mindset. So the quick recap, we started with our first mindset of people that we called connectors, and we labeled them as purple. And they have a group focus, and they're kind of tribal in their outlook and their attitude on things. And they don't really have much care for their own self-interest other than for the group. They figure the group will keep them in survival mode, so they don't really focus so much on their own personal needs. Somebody grows beyond that, they get more personally focused, and they become red, and we call them independents. And independents really care about themselves, and they like to be the center of attention, and they definitely care about what's in it for me. And they, like every group, think the whole world sees things like them. They presume that you are only in it for you. And so, knowing that, you have some power in how you can deal with them. It makes it easier when you understand where they're coming from. If someone expands beyond that, they once again turn to the group and say, what could be better than to be a builder, to be blue, to have structure and controls in the world that protect everyone, which is for my benefit, but then why not benefit other people too? So they can, on the plus side, they become structured. On the downside, they become bureaucratic. A lot of those folks in our world. And there's a necessity for that in our world. The structure of our environments, of our laboratories, of our universities, of our companies is absolutely a requirement. It would be anarchy without it. So there's an understanding why this is beneficial. Again, if someone keeps growing in their mindset, now they start to think more about these rules could be stifling. There's a lot of red tape. There's all of the stuff that's in the way that makes it harder to get things done. And you think, if only we could break out of that. And they become orange. And they get focused on accomplishment and just getting things done and creating new things. They're not just interested in the status quo. They want to go forward. And so there's a lot of benefits to that outlook because, that's where things get done. The downside of that attitude is it can become a little myopic. They're concerned mostly about the accomplishment that they're invested in, and other people may have other interests. And so those are orange folks. Now, we deal with a lot of orange people in our workday life. We deal with a lot of blue people in our workday life. And there's some red folks around. They're hard to avoid. And occasionally we deal with some purple people.
So Ken, you just introduced something different there that you haven't talked about in the last couple of episodes, but I think it's really useful, and that is the upside and the downside of each mindset. So when you go up to the mindset, you gain something, but you also to get a limitation. You also acquire a limitation. I think that's a really useful point, actually, because if nothing else, it actually helps you to realize that that even though you've moved to the next, if you feel you've moved to the next level or you're at a level above, in quotes, someone else, there's still, it's not perfect.
Yeah, and that's true. There are trade-offs at every step of the way, and it's why people bother to develop the next mindset. It's because at every level we realize their limitations, and is there a way to do it better? Is there a way to improve this? And every step of the way is an improvement. Even that first step of being purple, grouping up for survival, that's a great idea. When it's just you against the world, it's pretty tough. And so we can walk through each of these and say, this is what's good about this is what's bad about this. But we got to be careful, as we discussed last week, about getting too moralistic about it. It's not a matter of righteousness versus evil. It's not right versus wrong here. It's just a matter of this works about this, and this part doesn't work so well about this.
Is that on the graphic that we have for each stage?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good, because I think that really helps to distinguish between. I especially initially found it quite difficult to distinguish between, for example, red and orange, and people but if you have that kind of those different pointers, that can be really helpful. So that will be on the graphic, which is on the show notes for this podcast episode.
Right. Sometimes we can look around at the world and just think about famous people and what color were they. What was this person? What was that person? And you start to see patterns, and you start to recognize, like, oh yeah, that guy's really red, and that girl's really blue, and you start to see it out there in the world. And then you start to realize, if you think about that, it's like, okay, I can do this with movie stars and rock stars. Now I start thinking about people that I know. When I think about my family, I can think about the people in my workplace. I can think about people in my industry. And you start to see, this explains a lot about why this person acts and reacts the way they do.
So I think after you talk about the next two mindsets on the continuum, it might be fun to go through some people in history and or maybe current prominent people.
Sure.
And talk about what mindset you see them categorized as, and then that might give people a handle on how to practically identify people's mindset from in their own experience.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I think that this is one of the things that I really want to press here too. Everything that we're talking about in these podcasts, do them. We've all been living this life of taking in knowledge. That's especially true of scientists, and especially true of people that have gotten higher degrees. Taking in knowledge is one thing, but gaining experience is a totally different thing. So I've structured these things in such a way so that you can not just learn them, but so that you can take them with you and use them. That's why there's only 6 core mindsets being talked about here. They're mostly 6 is enough for you to deal with just about everything you deal with in the world. 6 is a number you can remember. You can remember what each of these are, basically, and you can start applying this right now. You can do it while we're talking, honestly, but you can do it after we're talking for sure. So let's move on to that next one. So remember we last had somebody who was orange. And orange is all about accomplishment and getting things done and cutting through red tape. They got a personal focus, but with a good heart. They want to get things done. They want to move things forward. They want to expand our world. Well, you take somebody like that and now give them a group focus, and they become what we call helpers, and we'll label them as green. Green people, they are the cheerful and happy ones. They are the ones that want to make life better for everyone. So they want to cut red tape, not just for themselves now. They want to see the red tape cut for everybody. They still appreciate the value of the structure, but they want everybody to have a chance. They want everybody to be able to break out like they've broken out. And these folks are not as common in the world as the blue people and the orange people, but we definitely know them. The best bosses are green. And maybe you're fortunate enough to have a green boss, or maybe you know of some green bosses at least within your organization. And they could be people in the industry, and there are definitely a lot of green people in bioscience. As far as a group, I think bioscience does better than many other groups in having green people because they're trying to change the world, and they want to do it for the benefit of everybody, not just for the benefit of themselves. So, somebody wanting to develop that new vaccine, that's a very green endeavor. If somebody can bring a green mindset to that, they can do amazing things. And now, I don't want to take away from the fact that there are just, again, the structural things that are necessary. Nobody's going to develop a new COVID-19 vaccine who isn't a bioscientist. This is not something that is going to be done by some teenager tinkering in their garage. This takes the structure, it takes the knowledge and the background and the understanding of the equipment and the history of vaccine production and all the rest of that stuff. But it's going to take more than that. It's going to take people that have a greater mindset to be able to do what needs to be done. And it's not just about the intellectual part of it, but being willing to give themselves to it, to really burn it at both ends, to make sure that they aren't stopped by practical problems, but they're just gonna keep going and keep going and keep going.
So would you say that it would be an accurate description to say that the green is kind of orange with the drive of orange without the being focused on yourself?
Yeah, they take it and they go beyond the focus on themselves. Now, and this is probably an important distinction to make here too, that, remember, red people are focused on themselves and blue people focus more on the group. And it is often blue people focus on the group to the exclusion of the self, which is kind of an artifact of the purple people who never think about themselves. But by the time you get to green, you don't just think about yourself, you think about yourself and others, as opposed to thinking about others instead of yourself. You become part of the other because you see there's not really a separation there. That you start to see the benefit for mankind in what you're doing. And now obviously that can be done with a huge focus, but it isn't necessary that it has to be that. You don't have to be changing the world to be green. What you're doing is you're caring about everybody it's going to impact. And whether that's just going to impact your team or it's going to impact your company or your community or your family or something local, that's still a green mindset. And And again, you'll see people like that in the world. There are people out there that really care about the group, but the group may be small. But you see it and you recognize, that's more than just being blue, and it's certainly more than being purple. This is somebody that's putting more into this, and they're not just operating from survival, and they're not just operating from just a structural requirement. A level I'll call integrity. Integrity is a good thing because it means something in physics too. To have physical integrity is something that's going to hold together. Whereas by the time somebody gets to green, there's something more to it than just the physics of it. Now we're talking about the humanity of it, that they're holding it together for the sake of something greater than just the physical connection.
And so, what would be the downside of being green? What do you lose when you move to green?
Okay, I don't know if I would put it as you lose, but what you willingly give up is thinking, I only care about my own accomplishment. Now I care about lots of people having the opportunity for accomplishment, or I don't care only about my own achievement. I celebrate achievement wherever it is. I'm not jealous or envious of somebody else's success. I rejoice in their success just as if it were my own.
And so, how might that look? How might that look, say, from an orange perspective as a negative? It would be that you maybe look less driven or less ambitious.
Well, if they might see it as a zero-sum game. That is, if you accomplish something and I haven't accomplished something, that it was because I couldn't also accomplish what you accomplished. They may see everything as a direct contest where there can only be one winner. So only one can be champion to the orange. But for the green, they're like marathon runners that are applauding the other runners also making it across the finish line.
That's a good analogy, yeah. Okay. Whereas I'm just trying to see from, how does that look from another perspective? That might look a bit weak to an orange person. Would that be right?
It could.
Yeah.
But usually, I would say that an orange person, again, is capable of understanding green thinking.
As long as they're the one that's being applauded by the green person.
Well, right. They'll see that this is not the same as blue. They'll definitely see blue as weak. This is the person that's just stuck in the weeds, is how an orange person will look at it. Where the green person, they're not going to see him as stuck in the weeds. They're going to be going, why did they go back into the weeds? What did they do that for? But they can understand if they make the effort to understand. And so I will call out to those of you who are orange that when you see green people, look more closely, recognize what's there, because these folks will tend to be leaders, and they're leaders because people will follow them. And that's something that an orange person might get frustrated at. The orange person may look at this and saying, I am a leader. People should be paying attention. Why aren't they following me? Because you're not acting green enough. That's why.
Too selfish, too self-focused rather. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, an orange person will realize I'm not selfish. I'm not red. And so why do people treat me that way? Well, because, especially if they are blue or if they are or purple or red themselves, that the distinction of orange and red will be difficult for them. They won't be able to tell it apart. So whereas that green person, they've made the flip to being group focused that even people at the lowest echelon can understand. So, these are the advantages of this. At every step, you're going to realize that I've been so immersed in either being group focused or being personally focused that it is time for me to expand out and start thinking the other way for a while.
Yeah, well, it becomes
and sometimes the thing for you to do is to get more personally focused. Sometimes the thing for you to do is get more group focused. There is no right or wrong about this. It's what's next. Well, you do what's next. And you may remember when we talked about human needs, when we talked about growth and contribution, and I said that people often who had those focuses would flip from time to time, where their primary was contribution and their secondary was growth, and then all of a sudden they flipped to growth was primary and contribution was only secondary, because it's a growth process. So the same thing will happen with this. You will move from personal focus to group focus depending on where things stand for you. And by the way, there's whatever focus you've got right now, there's nothing wrong with it. Immerse yourself in it. Get good at it. It's a great opportunity for you. None of these mindsets are inherently harmful. It's just some are more beneficial than others. And do the best that you can where you are today. And if you can move up, it's good for you. It's really good for you. But like anything, it's like, how it was when you were a freshman in college. Well, you used to be a senior in high school. You were the king. And now you've shown up and you're nobody. How did this happen to me? But you didn't go, I don't want to go to college because now I'm going to have to stop being a senior. It's like, no, you wanted to go. You wanted to go to that next level and you wanted to gain. And of course, once you got into it, you learned the mode and you moved up. And for those of you with PhDs, you moved up several times. So it's the same kind of process.
Yeah. So I think it may be a good time to interject to say that that if this is feeling a bit all very new, this is quite dense stuff. This is a podcast, or this set of podcasts is probably something that if this is of interest to you, it would be worth listening to a few times when looking at the graphic that I keep telling you to go and download at the show notes page on bitesizebio.com/podcasts. But this is dense stuff. The idea is to give you an immersion in this model, so you gain a basic understanding of it, and then you can go out and do your own experimentation. So if it's feeling a bit deep, then just give yourself a break. It is quite deep stuff, but deep as in it can get a bit complicated going back and forward, describing these different mindsets. At least I found it quite confusing to begin with. Just immerse yourself in it if you're interested, and then experiment.
And you got into science probably without any thought about this mattering at all. You didn't think, I didn't know I was going to have to know about this to be effective in my career as a scientist. Well, sorry, it wasn't in the brochure, but it's necessary. And it's worth it. And the fact is that many of your colleagues aren't bothering to get good at this.
Well, that's a really good point, Ken. I was going to say that is that actually, in my experience, the mind is a thing that a lot of scientists take for granted, looking after their well-being, which is why we do these podcasts and talk about this stuff on Bitesize Bio. It's quite neglected, and people don't experiment on themselves with these different kind of techniques and different kind of ideas to try and get better performance out of themselves and better outcomes for themselves. And so, again, as Ken says, it's necessary. It's not 100% necessary to do this to be a scientist. There are plenty of scientists who don't do it, but it will, if you apply it, these things. If you learn even one or two of these concepts and start applying them, in my experience, it makes things a lot better. It makes it a lot easier to get good results.
Sure. And some people leave science over this.
Yes. Yep.
This is the thing that gets them in the end. And if you really want to have a career in science, we want you to have it too. I want you to not only survive this, but thrive in this. And this will help you to do that. So we've got one more level. So imagine now we've got somebody who's green, and they care about the community. They care about about humanity, and they've cut all the red tape, and they've grown on top of the structure, and everything is amazing. And now that person turns focus inward again. I'm like, holy cow, what did they become? Well, we call them a perceiver. That is someone who is yellow. Now, yellow people are enigmatic and rare. They're the most introspective and self-aware of all these mindsets. And I will bet you've met a few of them. Some of them might have been your professors. Some of them may be industry leaders that you know, people that we regularly want to hear from the platform that just seem to have a bigger view of the world. They just seem to see so much. And what's special about these folks is they're chameleons. That is, they can become whatever mindset is necessary for the moment to deal with whoever they're dealing with, whether that's an individual or a group. And so, whereas here I have been telling you all along, make an effort to understand the other mindsets. Somebody who's a perceiver, who's yellow at that mindset, I don't have to tell them that. That's their automatic nature. They automatically do that. And these are people that we love to be around, and they're people we love to work for, and we love to follow, because they just have this energy to them, because they seem to see so much. So you can see the advantage of that. Being able to have full-sightedness of everything. That's the ultimate state to be in. But it's a high ambition. It requires a lot, and it requires you to let go of a lot of selfishness. And it's funny because this is a personal focus, and yet they are entirely unselfish about it, because their focus is, I must be great for the benefit of all. And so, again, not people you encounter every day, but people you probably know some. And if you are in the realm where you are orange or you are green, it's a mindset you could aspire to. It's something you could become. And the fact is, there are people out there right now that are, some of them are young, some of them are new to the lab. Some of them have been there for a while, but nobody's really taken notice of them, who have this in them. They could be this. And you never know who's out there that we're talking to, that they're going to hear this and go, you know what? I do need to step up to that. I need to be that. I can be that. So if you're one of those people, we are here for you. We need you. It's amazing the innovation that's come out of this industry, but we have not gotten near enough. We need more. Mankind needs what you do. So that's why I stand on this soapbox.
So it's, again, I'll reiterate from the other angle that that this is a model, and these people that you're describing who are already at yellow, in that yellow mindset, they didn't do it on purpose. This is just a natural kind of, one of the natural groupings of psychological groupings that are in the world, and as you're pointing out, there seems to be this we can mainly describe 6 different groupings in this context, and that's what this model is. And so these people haven't decided to become yellow, they just did that. But what by illuminating this pattern and allowing people to, with these models and the different colors, so people can easily identify, or more easily identify, how they are thinking and how other people are thinking. One of the ideas of this model is that you can look up at the next, see where you are and look at the next mindset and kind of get a feeling for how would you do that? How would you step up to that and start to do it? Would that be one of the possibilities with this model, Ken?
Sure. And it gives you a path, so you can see, like, you may realize, hey, I always want to improve myself. And a lot of us look at life that way. I always want to improve. But sometimes we don't know how. So I don't know how to get any better at this. You play tennis and you play the best tennis game you can, and you're going, I don't know how to get any better. Well, then you decide to get some coaching, and there's the coach right there that goes, well, I can tell you exactly what to do. You need to focus on this. You need to look at that. You need to try this. And you go, oh, if I had only known that, I would have done that a long time ago. So that's what we're trying to do here, is to give you just some handles of things that you can use to help in your own, call it self-improvement. But understand, too, that we want you to just be good at what you are now. You don't have to grow beyond this. You may be at a very fine level already, and a very, very useful level already. If you're blue and it's working, power to you. Keep it up. You don't have to become orange. In fact, you may look at that and go, it looks a little distasteful. I don't want to be a salesman. I don't want that attitude. I'd rather be down here in the details and dealing with the structure. And great. The world needs people like that. So, and we need capable people at that. It's not just, hey, we need a bunch of worker bees. This is professional work you're doing here. And it's got to be done by people who are capable of it, because we all know what a disaster it is when people are not capable and try to do this kind of work. We don't want that kind of thing going on. We don't want to promote it or propagate it.
It's quite interesting though that the progression up those levels is if you feel like you need, if you feel you need to move, in your mindset, you want to improve yourself, then in some ways, and this is very simplifying the situation, but in some ways you just need to look at where you are on that continuum and do one of two things, and that is focus more on yourself or focus more on everyone else, depending on where you are, and that starts to move you. That's one way to start moving in that direction. Does that make sense, or is that too simplistic?
Yes, that's excellent. That's spot on.
So if you focus on, if you are, for example, orange, and you feel what can I do next? What's the next improvement? Then okay, the next way to improve would be to start applying that ambition you have for yourself, start applying it to other people around you, and then you would start to move into the green mindset and all the benefits that come with that, I would guess.
Yes, that's right. So now another thing, when you're using these core mindset concepts to look at other people, and now let me give you a story of something that happened with me. I was dealing with a particular person who is a rather well-known and well-regarded person in the industry, in a company that is well-known and well-regarded. And I was very impressed with what they were doing. And my assumption was, after looking at this person, well, more than an assumption, I'd done the assessment here, and it's like, well, he's green. He's definitely green. But we kept having certain problems in dealing with this person that just didn't coincide with green. It didn't make sense to me until one day a colleague of mine said to me, he's not green, he's blue. And it just ding, everything lined up. Like, of course, that's why. I made the positive assumption because, blue and green have a lot of similarities, because any of these mindsets that are two apart, they're similar, and because they're both group focused, right? It's just like confusing orange and red that Nick talked about earlier. But when I realized, I was giving this person the benefit of the doubt for being green when in fact they're blue, and now I realized that every difficulty I was having with this person wasn't them, it was me, because I was treating them like they were green. Whereas if I had been focused, I would have recognized they were blue, and I would have treated them different, and they would have been a lot happier about it. So this is one of the reasons you want to use this stuff. If you find you're in baffling situations, or I don't understand why I'm not getting through to this person, or I'm not getting along with this person when it seems like I should be able to, and we just don't get it, and I don't know why they don't seem to like me, or they don't seem to like my ideas, or they're always obstructionist for me. Why? They don't do that to other people. Well, it's probably because you're treating them as if they're of a mindset that they're not. And it could really set you free. And then you realize too, you're not being nice to somebody to presume they are of a higher mindset than they actually are. Because again, it's not about higher or lower, it's about accuracy. So dial into what people actually are, and everything gets smoother. And you'll like people.
And so I just wanted to say that that what you described there about that situation with that person, and you kind of figuring that out again to a newbie who's still trying to figure out these. That's kind of a condescending word, newbie. I don't mean that. To someone who's just coming into that, into this, and looking at it from someone who's, this is coming from someone who's done this recently, as in me. It's what you just did there, it sounds like, you're doing it sounds like unattainable. It sounds difficult to understand how you could even do that. But again, I just encourage people to immerse themselves in this and just try it out and then see. And I think it becomes it's a lot easier than you think once you just get a practical understanding and an instinct for how this works. And again, you might look at this and think that, okay, this doesn't work. It doesn't work. I can't figure this out. Then that's cool. But most people that we've introduced this to, in person anyway, have at least some understanding and found some utility in it, I think. Would you agree with that, Ken?
That has been my across the board experience, and with company after company, in industry after industry. I've had people approach this very skeptically at the beginning, like, well, I'll go through it because I have to, but by the time we get done, I've never had anybody saying, well, that was a waste of time. I've often had people saying, when I first started this, I thought, I don't know, this doesn't seem like it'd be worthwhile, but I've changed my mind, and I've really found some uses for it. Now, I want to say one other thing. I love what you're saying, Nick, about immerse yourself in this, but I also don't want to scare anybody. It's like, don't feel like unless I just give myself heart and soul to this, it'll be of no use to me. Yes, if you immerse yourself, it will be of great value. But if you just play around with it, it'll be of value. So don't be afraid to try it out. And try it out in a safe environment. You want to look at, okay, what color is grandma? And you start thinking about it, and it becomes clear to you, like, oh, yeah, grandma. Yeah, grandma's definitely blue. And all right, well, how about grandpa? Grandpa's kind of red, So you'll start to see this, and you can then like, well, how far can I go? How well do I have to know them? Like, how about the mailman? What color is he? Or the clerk I just had at the store, or the barista that I see every day. What color are they? You'll start to realize, this is useful even with strangers. You can look at somebody and have very little interaction and realize, oh, this person's pretty purple, so let me start dealing with them that way. Or this person's really orange, so it's pretty clear. You'll see stuff jump out at you. So give it a chance.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well what you said about green people, for example. A lot of leaders are green and so on. Actually. Mm-hmm. I don't know, this is a comparing notes sort of thing, is that there's a lot of baristas who are green that I've seen anyway.
Yeah, it's funny. We will see that in certain industries, and you think, why? Well, it's because they don't care to be the orange ambitious. They want to make more of a difference for people. They like people. So, you can't map this, like, you just make a good point. You can't really map this to money, and you can't map it the income levels, and you can't map it to sociological levels either. And you will find green people living on the street sometimes, and you will find purple people in the C-suite. It's just these mindsets are available to anyone. And it's true that the higher up you go, the more likely you are to achieve in the world, to be more successful. If you've listened to this and you think I'm purple, I do want to encourage you to please try and grow beyond that. You will do better in life. If you're red, I won't tell you to, because first off, if you're truly red, you won't listen to me. You're red, you're going to do what you want. But at some point, you may realize, maybe I should broaden my horizons a bit. And like Nick suggested earlier, the great way to do that is just if you're of a mindset that is group focused, then switch to personal focus. And if you're in one that's personally focused, then switch to one that's group focused. And just making that change will open your eyes to all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Let's talk about people that let's make some applications here.
You just read my mind.
Yeah, some famous people and see where we would put them. So there's a number of people on the scene at any given moment. So is there anybody jumping out to you that you wanna do this with.
Okay, it doesn't have to be any one kind of current, I suppose. I mean, but say if you took some leaders, for example, Abraham Lincoln, Gandhi, Margaret Thatcher, for example.
Okay. So if you start with somebody like Gandhi, Gandhi is somebody that I would say is a perfect example of yellow, a truly exceptional human being. He is acutely aware of other people. He was able to interact with world leaders and the lowest of the low, the people that were living at the lowest echelons of society. He could stand up against immense forces and did so for decades. Extraordinary human being, and evidenced that he was yellow. So that's one example. Margaret Thatcher, it's an interesting one. Now I'm not British, I'm American, but she certainly made an impact on the world scene. So you couldn't help but notice her. And she's a interesting one. You could see characteristics of blue, but she was better than that. She had more to her than that. And she wasn't merely about herself, so she wouldn't have been orange. So green is probably where I would land with her. And what's interesting about that is for some folks who look at that, yeah, but she was hard and conservative. How could you be green? I think green would be a bunch of liberal people. It's like, oh, not necessarily. It isn't really about liberal versus conservative. It's about your focus on the world. And she saw a world that could be made better, and she definitely wanted to make it so. And so, she went beyond merely being orange in that regard, which is why I would say she would land in green. And who was the third person that you suggested?
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln. Yeah, Abraham Lincoln. Boy, oh boy.
Sorry.
And again, my leaning would be to say he was yellow because of his chameleon characteristic, that he could deal with very different people. And in fact, he made it a point to assemble a cabinet of people who were not all of his same political party, because he wanted dissenting views. He wanted to hear it all.
Refreshing.
And that is, yeah. Now that we look at some other characters like on the current scene, like Donald Trump. Donald Trump's clearly red. He's all about himself. It's all that matters. And by the way, it just goes to show you can be red and be very successful and very powerful and very well liked. So you certainly got a loyal following. There's nothing wrong with any of these mindsets in and of themselves, and they won't necessarily be a barrier to you. But the fact is, you won't see as many red people reach that level of power in the world.
Well,
as an example.
What about this? How about Julius Caesar? Purple. He must be red, actually. The empire was purple and he was red? Or what?
Yeah, I would say that. And there are such things as purple leaders, though. And I use Montezuma as an example, the head of the Aztecs. But, they also got crushed out of existence by the Spaniards. So, there was a certain lack of power in being purple that ultimately cost the whole civilization. And it isn't the first civilization that fell because they didn't rise above purple.
Okay. So just sticking with world leaders then, a blue one, Winston Churchill?
Yeah, I think that's a good example of blue. Yeah, because again, he really respected actually, you know what? I might have to say he was orange, just because of his earlier life. And he was super ambitious. And people generally don't retract in there, but he never did become green. So, but he saw the benefit of blue, that's for sure, and he definitely preached blue to everybody else.
So we have an orange now. How about Barack Obama? Green?
I would say he was orange turning green.
Okay, all right.
And that's kind of a good thing to bring up, that not everybody makes it all the way in. And I think he had some personal ambition that remained so, and has remained so up until this day. And again, I want to be clear, I'm not making any judgments about anybody here. saying that they were right or wrong or good or bad. Idi Amin was red. But he got a lot done. So you could take other characters like Muhammad Ali as an example of somebody. There's a guy who was orange turning green. He was really, really, really orange. I mean, that ambition on top of ambition. But he was willing to go to prison over not being open to being drafted and not going to, as he put it, to kill other colored people. I don't remember exactly how he put it, but he put it in a term like that. And here's a man who's a boxer who's a pugilist for a living, but he was not willing to kill people, and that was a very green position to take. But his ambition remained, so his orangeness didn't really fade away.
Okay, so I think the only one we haven't found a prominent blue person. So where do you go back to find a prominent blue person?
Okay, prominent blue person. I think you will find. Well, an example that I've used in the past, and it's a little bit dated, is Mitt Romney. He's a conservative senator, a Republican senator who's run for president, very much on a basis of rule of law and structure and Joe Biden is kind of acting blue these days, in that he wants to return to a familiar structure of respectability for the presidency in his assessment of it.
It's interesting. I'm trying to think of anyone who has actually been president of the USA who is blue.
Let me walk back through a few. Wow.
Mostly orange.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of orange.
Yeah, mostly orange at least. Yeah.
Yeah, and a couple green. Like Eisenhower was green, Kennedy was green. But all the rest in the last 100 years that I could think of were orange, or except for our current one. But think about if we think about other people in the world that are like Elon Musk, where there's an orange guy, odd and strange, but orange as they get, and Jeff Bezos, very orange. You can see that a lot of business leaders will tend toward being orange, and the people that are blue, their companies go out of business. So we've seen that the companies that have tried to stay blue and not make it as a result, and not just because of recent crises, but like what happened to Woolworths, what happened to Sears. They were blue organizations that couldn't exist in an orange world.
All sorts of things and situations you can map onto this, and one other way to look at that, I tend to look at it, is that if you go back in history, then come forward through history, then everybody tends to rise up that continuum together. I guess if you go back to the kind of Roman era, there was a lot, like purple was quite an achievement.
Yeah, exactly.
And then,
well, that's how the Roman Empire, merely by becoming purple, they took over the world.
Yeah. So whatever was before that was dominant, and then purple was the improvement.
Yeah. So,
and the improvement being just that they started banding together, but they didn't place value on individuals being.
Well, individuals were expendable for the sake of the group.
But purely the banding together
between
made them extremely powerful.
Yeah, and that's the difference between purple and blue. Blue people are not willing to sacrifice anybody. That violates the rules.
Yeah.
Although they aren't necessarily concerned about making it easy for any individual.
Sure.
That's why people turn orange. It's like, it's about time it got easier for certain people.
That's why I left the army.
Exactly. Yeah, I just had a flashback to the movie about Johnny Cash, and Johnny Cash was trying to get a record deal with somebody, and they were saying they didn't want to hear any more of these slow gospel tunes. There's plenty of that out there, and he wanted something more upbeat. And he said, so you got something against gospel music? Well, no, it's been done over and over again. He's like, well, you got anything against the Air Force? He says, no. He says, well, I do. But he had some songs that touched a little more on some nerves. And this is another thing we can look at. A lot of people that are movie stars or rock stars or performers, many of them were very red. That's why they bothered to rise to that level. And I like to use the example of Garth Brooks in country music. He's been the most successful country music artist ever, and he's sold the most albums of anybody. And I forget the number, but it's some outrageous, tens of millions of albums. And I heard an interview with him once, and they commented on how he had, achieved more sales than any country act ever, and without a close second. And they asked him, how do you feel about that? And he says, well, yeah, okay, I've sold 80 million albums, but there are 7 billion people. You do the math. He was not satisfied.
That's ambitious.
It wasn't enough. So, we'll definitely see this. So this is the takeaway I would give to everybody now. It's like, hey, just have some fun with this, and just go through your family and figure it out. What color each of these people, and go through the people in your work group. What are each of these people, and then if there are other important people in your world, whether that's maybe the president of your university or your company or some thought leader that really is impacting you, figure it out. Figure out what color do you figure they are. And every once in a while, you check back with yourself. Do I still think that? Do I still think that Donald Trump is red? Or is he? I think he's something else. And every once in a while, you will find no, that person's not red. They're orange. Or like I mentioned earlier, that person's not green. They're blue. But you'll get more clarity. And as you use this, you'll get better at it. And I want to point out, this situation that I'm talking about, I made a mistake about a person. The person who corrected me about it is somebody I taught this to. So there's always more to learn here. There's always more opportunity. And the process wasn't broken, and my understanding of the process wasn't broken either. I didn't apply it very well. And learning that was really useful to me when I realized, I see where I made the mistake here. And you won't get that by Nick and I talking in front of you. You can only get that by taking action yourself.
And I would say as well, as a scientist who's a bioscientist who has examined this and kind of integrated it, my first instinct was to try and really understand the whole thing, and to go to the really, but where does this come from, and where does and go really deep into where it came from and why it's like this and why would it be like that psychologically. And then I realized, actually, I don't need to do that. All I need to do is test the model, and if it works for me in my life, then that's all that matters here. So I in a way just take this at face value and experiment with it, and if it works, if it provides some insight for you, then that's enough. That's what I would suggest.
And I think that particular philosophy is a really good one. The idea of if you've got something that works, use it. And we're not talking about, this is not a religion. We're not talking about you have to have faith, or worse yet, credulity. Just try it out. If it works for you, awesome. If it doesn't work for you, throw it away. But we're going to give you enough tools here that work and have a record of working, that if something doesn't work for you at first go around, you may want to look at and say, is it me or is it the tool? So, but we all have our favorite tools, right? And we have tools that we go to again and again, and we have tools that we avoid. All right, well, maybe it'd be better if we'd learn not to avoid those tools, but you can function that way. But we're going to give you enough tools in this podcast that you're going to come away with things that you can use. And some episodes will come along and you go, man, that is right in my zone. That is exactly what I need. And other things you're going to go, oh, maybe somebody else will like that. But I hope for Core Mindsets that we've made you believers, because, man, this Core Mindsets is core for a reason. It really, really matters.
Yeah, I would say for me, out of the two concepts we've discussed so far, the core mindsets and the human needs. I understand the human needs one and it's useful, but this one really helps me on a day-to-day basis, the core mindsets. So, but then it might be the opposite way around for you. So, but
Sure.
There are plenty more tools where these came from as well.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. And if surely you're going to hear something useful. So the next thing that we're going to cover, we're going to do another 3-part series, and it's going to be on charisma. We're going to call them charisma factors. And again, there's going to be 6 of them. And you may be wondering, what do I need charisma for? Well, I promise you I will make the case for why not only you need charisma, you must have charisma, and you must use charisma, and that you do have charisma.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that the first instinct is, I don't have charisma, because you have a single definition of charisma. But
right.
Actually, you do, but you maybe just don't know you do.
Yep. So we're going to clarify all that for you. And again, this is something, there was no Charisma 102 in university. They didn't teach you this stuff. And then you got to the lab, and it's not in the training manuals, and it's not in the operation book. So we're trying to fill in that third area for you so that you can have a great career and really enjoy your time and be very successful and benefit the world doing the things you're doing.
Okay, and that just leaves us to say that if you are enjoying this podcast and you haven't done so already, please join us in the Happy Scientist Club Facebook group, actually. It's at facebook.com/The Happy Scientist Club, all one word, and give us a knock there and we'll let you in, and we'll be covering all sorts of things in there in more depth and having different events and so on for you. So I think that leaves us just to wrap up here. Thanks, Ken, for that. Another great installment.
All right, thank you.
And we'll see you all again next time. Take care.
The Happy Scientist is brought to you by Bitesize Bio, your mentor in the lab. Bitesize Bio features thousands of articles and webinars contributed by hundreds of PhD scientists and scientific companies who freely offer their hard-won wisdom and solutions to the Bitesize Bio community.